Welcome to the Bullpen Show. I'm your host, Austin Alexander, and I want to welcome in our guest for today, Britt Reames. Britt, how are you doing, sir?
Good, Austin. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely, man. Well, we got a lot of ground to cover with Britt. Before we do that, I want to kind of go back to a few days ago. We had the MLB draft, and a number of guys heard their name. None from the high school ranks this year, but there were 11 who played high school baseball in South Carolina. I'm just going to rattle those off real quick. Those 11 young men that heard their name called on either day one, day two, or one person actually that was assigned after the draft. Cam Canarella out of Clemson was the first pick out of our state. He was at Hartsville High School. And I'm just going to call these out. Nathan Hall from Lexington, Evan Sierri from Landrum, Camden Troyer from Powdersville, Skylar King, Brooklyn Casey, Connor Rasmussen from Fort Mill, Noah Franklin attended West Ashley High School, Luke Roop once went to North Myrtle, Brody Fowler, East Side, Matthew Becker from Chapin. And then after the draft, I just saw earlier today that Daniel Brooks that went to the College of Charleston and prepped at Bishop England signed a free agent contract right after the draft with the Atlanta Braves. So that's a trip down memory lane for us, guys that hail from South Carolina that heard their names. So congratulations to each of those guys. If they decide to sign, I'll be pursuing their career certainly at the professional level. That's something you certainly can speak to. And we're going to talk a little bit. A couple of decades ago, you heard your name called and parlayed itself into a nice professional career too. We're going to talk about all those things. But if we could, I'm just going to kind of tell folks who we're listening to and why we wanted to have you on. Britt Reames is from Seneca High School. We're going to talk a lot about the legendary Reames brothers that came out of Seneca High School. After that, he went to the Citadel, played 3 years, drafted in the 17th round by the St. Louis Cardinals, and then was able to enjoy not only a nice professional career, but also parts of 6 seasons with 4 major league teams at the big league level. After that, Rick got into coaching at Furman, was at Citadel as a pitching coach as well, and is now the head coach at Oceanside Collegiate. So I'm going to bring you back in, Britt, and we got a lot to get to. So I'm going to go right into it. I mentioned your brothers and growing up in Seneca. If you could take us inside that household of 3 boys that did nothing but want to compete and play sports. Tell us a bit about your childhood and young Britt growing up.
Yeah, so you mentioned Seneca. Let me take a step back and say, okay, I played my freshman year at Hanahan. So my youth growing up was vital in the Charleston area and at Hanahan because my dad was a athletic director and head coach at Hanahan High School. As I was growing up, myself and my brothers got to spend a ton of time with older high school kids as young guys. And I think that's one of the areas that made us better. We were always with older guys at practices, at football practice, at baseball practice as, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old. And then I played my freshman year in high school at Hanahan and then left and moved to Seneca to take care of my dad's mother, who had Alzheimer's. And that was a learning process for us as a family because we really didn't know what that disease was and got to see that up close and personal firsthand, how it affects families and how it affects, just the dynamic of a family because you lose the cognitive thinking is lost and you don't really understand it, but that was something that we learned as a family. When we moved to Seneca, great place. I was kind of in culture shock moving from Charleston to Seneca. It's a little different. You go from the coast to the mountains, but I learned to love and have a fond, great taste for the upstate of South Carolina. Seneca played multiple sports there, football, and baseball. Basketball I stopped playing when I was a sophomore, and just that was the kind of the foundation of our youth. And then growing up with brothers, obviously there was fighting, there was pushing each other to the limits. My dad being like one of us, he was like a brother with us, but a super vital role my dad played in our development and our just motivation to become athletes.
And then we mentioned your 3 brothers, Jay and Joe Don.
Yeah.
Joe Don played football at Clemson, but all 3 of you guys played professionally. If you could kind of talk a little bit about what some of those wars were like, the difference in ages, and of course the competition back home when you guys would suit up either to play football, baseball, basketball, or whatever was on the board to compete at.
Yeah, we grew up in I got my Jay is my middle brother. I'm the oldest of 3. So Jay is the middle. We're only 14 months apart. So, we were like twins pretty much. And then Jodon is 6 years younger than myself and Jay. So he was the runt of the family. But he was also the best athlete of the family out of all of us, like with hands down best athlete. But Jay, just to give you a quick story, we're playing Walhalla. I was a catcher and a shortstop coming up through high school. Didn't even pitch in high school until a little bit my senior year out of necessity, and I didn't really know how to pitch. But I was Jay's catcher. Jay was the pitcher, so he was a junior. I was a senior. We're playing at Walhalla, and Jay walks the bases loaded at Walhalla, and I go out for I'm mad because he's throwing balls all over the place. I'm getting beat up behind the plate, blocking balls, whatever. I have to go to the mound and talk to him, and we get into a fight on the mound. And our head coach at the time wouldn't come out to the mound. He got my dad out of the stands to come out to the mound to get us to break us up to break us up in the middle of a high school game. So Jay we break up, whatever. I go back behind the plate, and he strikes out the side with the bases loaded after that meeting and that fight on the mound. I mean, it was a fight. It wasn't an argument. We were in arms with each other. But that's just one of the loving dynamics of being blessed to being able to play with a brother, in high school. And then Jodon, let me go to
Well,
Jodon.
obviously,
Go ahead. I was going to say, let me go to Jodon. Jodon was, a lot younger, so I was already like off to college while he was in high school and growing up. But I would come home before that, like when he was little, we used to play this game called Rack, and it's a football game in the house. And we had a hallway, and we would set up pillows. Me and Jay and I were the tacklers. We made Jodon run the ball, and he would have to run and get past us in a small hallway, and we would absolutely just destroy him. And he would cry and laugh and cry and laugh and holler, and for my dad or for my mom, but it was all in fun, and it made him better too. So, but he was definitely, he played baseball and football at Clemson. He wasn't just a football player.
well, he was pretty elusive on the football field, but I guess you guys taught him at a very young age either there was going to be punishment or you can try to run free, and he did that quite well too. Well, obviously you
Yes.
had a good career at Seneca, a good high school career, and it was time to choose a school. Tell us, kind of walk us through the process of what your recruiting process was like, and then you chose Citadel. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think the recruiting process has gone back to where it was when I was coming in. So now guys can't get talked to their junior year, correct? So we couldn't get talked to till our junior year. But I remember like my sophomore year playing in a league somewhere. It was like a summer league. It was like, it wasn't Legion, but it was like a travel team, but it was like put together, and it was a really elite team. And we went and played, and NC State was there, which was Ray Tanner at the time, who's now the athletic director at South Carolina, and his assistants were there. And that's kind of how we got on the map as players with right then as a sophomore. Now they couldn't talk to you, but they started sending you letters. You would get letters, from, I got letters from, that's how I was like, okay, let me see what schools there are. But I had kind of narrowed down schools that I wanted to go to by the time I was a junior. And it was based off of those letters that I had gotten from those schools through the time. So you'd have stack of letters like this, because that was the communication back then. And I played into my senior year, and I thought maybe I got some draft attention at that point in time. And I thought maybe I might get drafted out of high school, but I knew that I was going to college. That the schools that recruited me the most were NC State, East Carolina, Florida State. There was a couple more, but I narrowed it down to like NC State and Florida State. Citadel wasn't even in the picture. When I evaluated my options, Florida State was number one. But I didn't have a big scholarship there. They could offer you books back then. Not a 25%. They didn't have to be a 25% rule. It could just be books. But they had offered me 40% to come to Florida State, and that was Mike Martin Sr. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, dude, they just signed Mike Martin Jr. He plays the exact same positions I do, which I was a catcher and a shortstop. That's what I thought I was going to be coming out of high school. And so I started thinking about it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm interested. I keep having like Citadel calls. The Citadel didn't even recruit me. They sent me letters, but they weren't like highly recruiting me. So one day after my senior year, I got or junior late in my junior year. No, it was my senior year. I called the Citadel. I hadn't committed or anything yet. I was that's how late it was. I called the Citadel and I was like, "Hey, I'm playing in a Legion game tonight. I'm interested in coming to the Citadel." And our game's at Seneca. And man, Coach Jordan and Coach Randy Cooper and all the coaches from the Citadel showed up at my game. Like, and I had given them like 1 day notice, and they drove from Charleston to see us play. And immediately after that, they had me in on a visit, and my heart told me, "Hey, you want to go to the Citadel?" And I committed to them right after my visit, and that was an exciting time for me. It was like a I didn't know how the Citadel was. I just knew that they had played in the College World Series in 1990, and that Geddes Glaze was one of my favorite people to watch because he pitched and he caught. So when I made that decision, I didn't understand what the Citadel was, meaning the military, how hard it was going to be. I didn't do any of that research, and they didn't show you that on a visit. Obviously, they say, "Hey, you got to wear a uniform." They didn't tell you how hard it was going to be. So I committed to them and didn't change my commitment. Then we started having good commitments coming in that class with David Beckley, with Brian Callahan, all Stratford boys that Coach Jordan had coached, before he came to the Citadel. And there were more, Kenny Lott, Brian Butler, like a really good recruiting class that they put together their first year. And I just sat back and waited and didn't really learn about the Citadel and went in blind. I'm going to be honest with you. My dad had coached at the Citadel too. That's crazy. When I was really small, he was the first ever strength coach at the Citadel in the Tom Moore era of football. So, I went into the Citadel blind with what I was going to have to do.
Well, let's stay with that. So now you land there. Some of these things that you weren't aware of probably smack you in the face that first week that
Yeah.
has its own nickname, right? If you could tell
Yep.
us about being a knob, and then, of course, then the baseball, and we'll get to the baseball portion of your career at the Citadel. But what were those first few days, those first few weeks like?
Yeah, it was, as soon as my parents dropped me off at the Citadel and then they all left, you walk up to this table and you find your name and you find the company that you're supposed to be with. And all the parents get taken out of the barracks. And then all of a sudden it's a mad like melee of just chaos with people yelling at you, people telling you to go here, people telling you to go there, and you have to just stay like, I guess, surprised and shocked, but kind of have a smile inside about what's going on. And that's kind of the approach that I took when that happened because I really didn't know what was going to happen. So I didn't take it like super like serious. I took it as just, hey, I got to do this to play baseball and get my education and let's go. And so, they'd make you run around the barracks, run upstairs, start doing push-ups, get your chin in, start bracing. They taught you all that within like 5 minutes of when you were there. And it was overwhelming. It was like a shock. It was like shock and awe is what it was.
I'm sure there was probably a moment or two where you're like, "What have I gotten myself into?" But like you
No
said,
question.
you were there to play baseball and get an education, and of
Yeah.
course you were able to do that. So you're a baseball player. You mentioned that you came in as a catcher shortstop. Anybody that knows you a little bit more too knows that your eventual meal ticket was on the mound. So how did that come into play, going from catcher shortstop to I'm going to pitch here too, and of course put together an illustrious career while you were at the Citadel?
Yeah. I had to compete for the catching job my freshman year. There was like 4 catchers that were upperclassmen that were there, competed, and ended up becoming the starting catcher my freshman year and caught every game as a freshman. Did pretty good. I hit 300 and had like a couple home runs as a freshman, but I wasn't like a good hitter. I mean, I didn't know that at the time because I was just athletic enough, fast enough, had good hand-eye coordination, but I didn't really understand hitting. I didn't understand, my swing, any of that. Not near what these guys have offered to them today about swings and understanding how to hit. I didn't know any of that, but caught my freshman year, and then when you're in college, you go play summer ball. I went off to play summer ball in Baltimore, Maryland, with a team called Johnny's, and the manager was Walter Yaus, who was a scout for the Milwaukee Brewers. And I walk in with my catching gear on my shoulder, all my, you got all this, a lot more luggage than a lot of the other players who just got a glove and a bat. A bat. He comes in. He says, "Hey, you're Reamsy." He was a real short guy, round guy, and I said, "Yes, sir." He said, well, I heard you got a good arm." I said, "Yes, sir." He's like, "Well, I'm gonna make you a pitcher this summer." And I was like, "What? I'm not gonna be a catcher?" And he's like, "I'm gonna make you a pitcher. We got two big catchers that are on the roster. We're gonna let them guys catch." And I was like, I was kind of upset. I was like, "No, sir. I need a hit. I need to play." He's like, "Well, I'll let you play. I know you can play every position. You don't just catch. You can play anywhere." I was like, "All right, as long as I get to take BP and hit, I'm fine." So I became a pitcher through my bullpens. I started to learn the routine of a pitcher. Played a little bit of outfield, never caught one inning in summer ball that year. Did not catch one inning, and absolutely fell in love with being a pitcher and like how you could control a game. Like and had a good summer. Was very successful. Went back to college, and obviously they had kept up with me during the summer. Had our post summer meetings with coaches, and went in, and Coach Jordan's like, "Hey, you want to be the man behind the plate or the man on the mound?" I said, "I want to do both starting out. Try it." And so I tried it, started off okay. The second tournament of the year, I used to play tournaments early in college back then. We were playing Kentucky, I believe, at Old College Park or Rainbow Stadium. And I was on first base, and a guy hit a ball in the right center gap, and it's real shallow in right field, but then it cuts out. Well, he didn't hit it to the deepest part. He hit it to the smaller cut. But Coach Jordan tried to send me from third, scoring from first, and I slid into home head first and compound fractured my left finger, and the bone was sticking out. It was nasty. And after that, I said, "Coach, I think I'm just going to be a pitcher." And I didn't catch anymore, didn't play any other positions. I just became a pitcher from that second series as a sophomore all that year, and then my junior year.
Well, that certainly turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Didn't feel like it at the time, but then you were able to throw yourself obviously into the craft that helped pay some of your bills along the way. So you have the tremendous career on the bump for the Bulldogs, and culminating in you end up getting drafted. So kind of take us through. You realize that the college career is going to turn into something a little more. This decision to go from catcher hitter to pitcher only is going to be something that kind of carries you going forward. How did that work? And of course, how did we talked about these other guys just a little bit ago that just heard their name called and were able to ink their name with a professional club. Take us through the college pitcher to now all of a sudden you're getting a shot in pro ball.
Yeah, as a sophomore, I think I was kind of learning the trade, learning the craft. Yeah, I was like 6-4 and had a pretty good ERA in the Southern Conference, which was pretty competitive back then. But as a junior, I really started to understand it and learn it. As a sophomore, I got to go play in, I can't remember what league. I think I went to the Valley League, but then went to the Cape Cod. So that really helped me. And, Tom Walter was my pitching coach, which he's the head coach at Wake Forest in Cape Cod. Hey, can we take a break? I got to use the restroom. I know you got to edit this out. I drank coffee. All right, yeah. So in the having that junior year at the Citadel, I kind of came into my craft as a pitcher and had a great year at 10-3. Was getting some pro interest. Didn't know how much pro interest, but really didn't know what round. There wasn't a ton of communication. It's different today than it was back then with scout. But I knew there was some scouts that were interested. So I kind of went on my way after that season. Went back to the Cape Cod. Pitched really well in the Cape. I think my velocity I was getting a little bit stronger, a little bit more physical. Started to develop more as just a man. I was 20 years old, 21 years old. And I got seen there quite a bit in summer. So I was like, okay, let me go home. The draft's about to happen. Let me see what's going to happen with the draft. I get a phone call. I'm at the lake with my buddies in the summer, and I get a phone call from my dad saying, "Hey, the St. Louis Cardinals or on the phone. They just called. They took you in the 17th round. He's like, come home. The scout's coming over to the house right now. He wants to sign you immediately. I'm like, that quick? It was Randy Benson. And so I drove home. I was in Clemson and drove back to Seneca, which is about 8 miles. Got there and Randy was already there. He was already at my house. This is how fast it was. I go in there, sit down. I'm 5'11", like 160 pounds, soaking wet out of high school. Like I had lost weight. I'd been playing, I was small. Like I got a picture of it. I'll never forget it. And I'm sitting at the table with all the papers out in front of me, like head down, signing it. My arms were that big around. I'm like, dude, how am I that small, ready to go play? But that was one of the reasons why I knew that I needed to start my career now in pro ball. Number one, I was sort of old. I was a reclasser, as they call it these days. So my parents had held me back, but I was gaining an extra year of pro ball experience by leaving as a junior, as opposed to staying and being a year older in college, if that makes sense. Like, so I think, to put it in easier terms, like when you reclass as a high school kid or even younger right now, one of my opinions is that, and this is from a coach and from having done it, is that it helps you to go to college, but then it hurts you for a year off of your pro ball because you're a year older and you only have a certain timeline in pro ball. You look at guys now. I mean, Clayton Kershaw is 37 years old. He's done. He throws 89. You saw him last night. Hey, was that 91? No, that was 89. But got drafted, signed that quick, packed my bags, and went to New Jersey in the develop, whatever they call it, New Jersey Penn League. And that's where I started my pro career. I mean, it was right after college. I had pitched 101 innings. That's a lot of innings in college as a pitcher. Yeah, and that was the start of the journey.
Well, if you could tell us a little bit about that journey and then culminating into, you eventually get the call. You're putting up good numbers in the minor leagues. You're climbing that ladder towards the big leagues. At what point do you realize I might be doing enough to get the call? And what was it like when you did?
Yeah. All right. So started in New Jersey. I made like 3 starts in New Jersey, and they're like, all right, this guy's a college guy. He's advanced above where he is. So they sent me to Savannah, all in that same half year when you get drafted. So I finished my first half a year of pro ball in Savannah, which was kind of cool. It was close, a lot like Charleston. Played at an old field. It was. I got hurt though. I was having some shoulder impingement. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell. Back then, you learn that you need to tell your trainers, tell everyone, hey, I'm not feeling right. Bless you. But I came home after, I think I went like 3-5 maybe or something like that in Savannah. I go home and I tell my dad, I'm like, look, man, I need to go get my shoulder checked out. I got an impingement in my shoulder. I wasn't feeling right at the end of the year. So I go to the Clemson orthopedic, who's their surgeon. He did all their surgeries back then. He was their team doctor. He still is. He's still involved. His name's Dr. Larry Bowman. And I go in and he does some arthroscopic surgery to my shoulder, finds a labrum piece that's hanging down in my shoulder, like just touching my bicep tendon. So he shaved that off. And, he went in the front and back, just arthroscopic, not any major surgery, no reconstruction, none of that. So I got it cleaned up. I didn't tell St. Louis. I went back for spring training and they're like, son, you had surgery on your shoulder? Why didn't you tell us? I'm like, well, I didn't know to tell y'all then. I just was trying to get it healed before I came back to spring training. And they're like, well, you got to tell us all this stuff. And so they got to get all the records and everything. I was like, all right. And they're like, you're fine now? And they're like, I said, yeah, I'm fine now. I've been rehabbing, been on the throwing program. I'm 100% ready to go. So within that 2 months of downtime in the summer after, or fall, whatever it is, when you finish in September, I got healthy after arthroscopic surgery. Went to spring training, had a good spring training, and they sent me to Peoria, Illinois, which was the Midwest League, and pitched really well that year. I was our pitcher of the year for the Cardinals, and that kind of put me on the map as a prospect. I was a command artist, and I can credit that year and being with Ray Surge as why I became the pitcher that I did. He was a big league pitching coach, pitched in the big leagues for a while, but he's the one who molded me mechanically and a lot mentally with how to pitch and what to do. But it was mainly getting all my body right, kind of the dynamics of the mechanics these days. Where it's all on his computer, it's your movements, everything. But he did that for me that year, and I had a great year. Went on. They invited me to big league camp that next spring training, which was 1996, 97, 97. Yeah. Went to big league camp and was pitching in a big league game in spring training, and I felt something in my elbow. I'm like, dude, man, I'm on the verge. Like, I'm this close to making it to the big leagues, and my elbow, I got to tell them. So I told them I was St. Louis's first ever case of Tommy John surgery. So they didn't really know how to handle the coordination. So I rehabbed it for a year because MRIs and all that didn't show the tear in my elbow. And I was still fairly strong. I mean, you can throw with like a minor tear in your ligament, but it's painful. And so I missed a full year of just rehab, stayed back in St. Petersburg, Florida, which was where our spring training was, and missed that whole year. Finally, I told him, I'm like, look, we got to do something. Like, this is not healing. And they gave me like what you call a dye MRI now. And they shot a dye in there, and they found the inner tear of my labrum, which was still torn. And so they said, all right, who do you want? You can go to Job or you can go to Andrews. I said, well, I'll go to Frank Job. So they flew me out to California. I stayed with my agent, had the surgery, stayed with my agent for a couple of days or 4 or 5 days, got my surgery, came back, started the whole rehab process again. But in that period, I was thinking, like, I better prepare for life after baseball because you don't know if you're going to get back. You have those things that are, and so I talked to my agent and I said, listen, I want to go back to college and finish my degree at the Citadel. So during that and I want to rehab at the Citadel because rehab, they had a good guy named Andy Clausen, who was a lifer at the Citadel. He was their physical therapist, trainer, everything, do it all. And so I've started that. I got my classes, went to school and rehabbed like 3 times a day in the Citadel's training room because all I had to do, I didn't have anything to do but go back to the Citadel and rehab. But I did have to put on a uniform and I did have to go through all the Citadel stuff, but it gave me time to reflect on everything that I missed at the Citadel while I was there because I chose to miss it, and everything that those guys did that I didn't do as a freshman and sophomore and junior at the Citadel because I had a one-track mind. I was playing baseball and I wanted to go. That was it, get my education. But I got to see a bigger picture of the Citadel and what it was really about. And I was older and I understood it more at that time. But I rehabbed, came back. I was on the verge of getting released by the Cardinals in 1998 at their winter meetings. I'll never forget it. I had 2 or 3 of the pitching guys, coordinators call me and say, hey, Dave Jorgensen was our minor league director. He's thinking about releasing you, and we all fought for you to stay because we know you're an organizational player. We know that you were on the verge of making it to the big leagues at a young, on a fast track. And they say, we believe that you can come back. And we also believe that you can help younger guys in our organization as you continue to go. So we fought for you. You're going to come back spring training and see what, try to get healthy. And so I came back, and after that surgery, it was like 10 months, and they sent me to the Carolina League, which was in Potomac, Woodbridge, Virginia. Remember that shooter? Remember the sniper? It was Woodbridge, Virginia. That's where it was. That's kind of related. People can relate to where it was. So it's a suburb outside of DC. So I pitched there, and I did well when I pitched, but they didn't know how to. They started me. So I would make a start and then I would miss 3, 4, 5 weeks. So I continued on that year, did well, and then went to that next year after I was completely healthy. I gained velocity coming back into spring training after kind of that rehab year in Woodbridge. And I felt like I was finally getting back to where I used to be when I was in Peoria. But what happened was I had done so much rehab that my elbow was a lot stronger, my shoulder was a lot stronger, and my velocity went up, but my command suffered. So I had to learn how to get my command back with velocity, and I never really 100% got that total command back. But when you gain velocity, you can get away with a lot more than you can when you don't have that velocity. So it was a catch 22 in there. And looking back on it, I probably had rather have had my command than just the velo and been more walk prone, because I'd walked more guys than I ever had before. And that was frustrating in that. So that was in 2000. They sent me to Little Rock, Arkansas. I don't pitch really well. I don't pitch that good early, but then I'll go on a string of 5 starts in a row where I'm giving up 0 or 1 runs in like 6 or 7 innings or 8 innings pitched. And so a guy in the big leagues got hurt named Andy Bennis. He was having knee issues, and they sent me to Memphis, and I carried that string over. I went 6 straight starts in Memphis in AAA with only giving up 1 run in 2 of the 6 starts. So the rest of them were shutouts. And I'm laying in my apartment. I'll never forget. And I'm dreaming that I'm getting called up. Like, this is no joke. I'm thinking that, like, at any point in time I can get called up. I had no idea Andy Bennis was hurt. We really didn't follow the big leagues a lot. We just went about our business. But we knew a little bit about, the big leagues, and you're just trying to take one outing at a time. And I'm laying in there, and all my roommates are not there. You live like 4 people to an apartment. It was crazy. You don't have a lot of money. And I go into the field early. I was always an early guy to the field. I walked to the field. I lived downtown Memphis, would go out of my apartment, walk to the field, get there, eat, fix lunch, start my program with pitching or whatever I had that day. And I get there before the manager even gets there. When the manager gets there, he comes out. He says, "Hey, Reamsy, I need to talk to you," and calls me into the office. And I'm like shaking. Like, I start shaking because I don't know, kind of know, but I don't. I had I was like thinking about it in my apartment. Like, I'm gonna get called up, at some point. And this was August the 17th. So it was 2 days before my birthday, or August 18th. My birthday is August 19th. And he calls me in there. He says, Andy Bennis went on the injured list. They need a starter in St. Louis. You're going to get called up and go make a start against the Phillies at home in St. Louis. And man, I just kind of you kind of start sweating. You have flashes in your head of like everything you've gone through to get to this point. And it's really a surreal moment where, you want your family there so bad, and you can't wait to tell them, because those are the first people you tell is your family. And then you tell your friends, and then you start making plans to go to St. Louis. So he told me that, and it was a whirlwind. Memphis is not that far from St. Louis, and I had my car in Memphis, so I packed up all my stuff, drove to St. Louis, walked in the clubhouse, and couldn't believe, I was there. But at the same time, felt like I deserved to be there because I earned it. And I get to St. Louis, and they give me a day to settle in, and I watch a game, do some charts, and the next day I'm pitching against the Phillies in St. Louis. And I'll never forget that. I had my parents there. I had like my closest friends there. That's another thing the Citadel is like, it was all my Citadel buddies from the Citadel that played baseball with me that came to the game. I had, all friends and family were there, and it was awesome. They all flew there within a notice, and I pitched okay. I didn't pitch great, but we didn't win. Ken Bottenfeld was the starting pitcher. He was on a mission because he was with St. Louis the year before, and St. Louis didn't re-sign him, and he was in Philly, and that's who I matched up against. And he threw a 1-hit shutout, complete game, 9 innings, and we lost like, I don't know, 4-0. I think I gave up 3 or 4 runs. I walked some guys, but I can remember I struck out a bunch of guys. I think I struck out 8 in like 4 1/3, but walked like 4 or 5 guys. Pitch count got high. I don't think I made it to 5 innings. You were expected to go 6 or 7 back then. Now you're expected to go one time through the lineup as a starter. It's crazy.
Isn't that right? Well,
Yeah.
that's right. So now you're a big leaguer, man. All right, you've
Yeah.
arrived. Now
Yeah.
you got to figure out how to stay.
Yeah.
And I can look at the stats now, and I can now tell people you're able to pitch in parts of 6 seasons
Yeah.
with 4 different clubs. But now you're with the Cardinals, the group that not only drafted you, but was, I guess you were their lab rat for the Tommy John and the injuries that you dealt with. But they were patient enough to keep you on board and give you an opportunity to come back from it. And of course, they give you the opportunity now to pitch in the big leagues that you earned. So now you're there. And if you could kind of talk about some of the highlights of that, pitching in the postseason, and then I guess in general, just your big league career. Now you're in the show. Some of the, I guess, better memories, maybe even some funny
Yeah.
stories. When you think back to your play days at the big league level, what do you remember?
It's so crazy that it was so long ago. I mean, I think we're getting old. I know I'm getting old. I'm 52 this year. I don't know how old you are, but I know we're pretty close in age. But it's been a while ago. They're great memories, and really just the journey and the resilient effort that it took, the commitment to become a big leaguer. Not a lot of people understand how hard it is to get there, but then how hard it is to stay there. But once I was there, like I started to have rhythm and find a routine and find the study habits of learning how to get big league hitters out. And I pitched really well in St. Louis. Obviously the first start opening, my first start was super memorable. I went over that. And then as you go, I think I can remember, pitching against Kerry Wood in Wrigley, and I'm pretty sure we beat him. So that was kind of cool, getting the matchup against Kerry Wood and beating him. I know I matched up against Glavin in Atlanta a couple times. That was one of the highlights of that year, which this is all in 2000. This is my first year in pro ball, and it's like not even a year. It's like August, September, and then playoffs a little bit of October, because we made it to the NLCS that year. But I'm pitching in a division series against the Braves, and it's a clinch game. And I get a call. I'm in the bullpen at this point because I made the playoff roster as a bullpen guy, not as a starter. Because in the playoffs you only need 3 starters, and we had Darryl Kyle, Pat Hinkin, and Garrett Stevenson, which probably no one knows who that is, but he was starting that game, and he has an injury. His elbow hurts, or shoulder or something, and they get me going in the bullpen, and I go in, pitch against the Braves, go like 4 or 5 innings of, I don't know, 2 or 3 hits. I don't know if I gave up a run, but we won the game. And I go back into the clubhouse, and this is on a Saturday. And one of the reporters says, I was always following my brother because my brother was at Clemson and they were playing Virginia that day. And I always tried to, go to the games or watch the games, watch him play. But they said, hey, this must be a great day in the Reames household. Your brother took a kickback, returned a punt for Clemson for a touchdown versus Virginia, and you just got the win versus the Braves to clinch the division. I'm like, man, I didn't even know that. And then they showed the video and showed us winning and jumping over the rail and hugging. So that was a super memorable moment of 2000. Was the Reames boys having a pretty good athletic day, one at Clemson and then one. In the meantime, Jay is in the Cardinals organization too. This is my middle brother, so he's in minor league ball. So I get to see him all during spring training and still get to follow him, his weekly progress as a pitcher. So got that win. We went on to play the Mets in the NLCS after that division series against the Braves. And that was the year the Mets had Hampton, Leiter, and one other lefty. Hampton, Leiter, and I can't remember who the other lefty was, but they dominated our lineup because we were a heavy left-handed hitting lineup in St. Louis. We had Will Clark was playing for Mark McGuire, who was playing first base. Mark McGuire was out with an injury. You had Ray Langford was in left field. He was a lefty. You had Jim Edmonds. He was in center field. He was a lefty. You had J.D. Drew. He was in right field. He was a lefty. You had Fernando Vina leading off. He was a lefty. Or was he a switch hitter? No, he was a lefty. And then I guess you had 5 like premium left-handed hitters in your lineup. And those lefty pitchers for the Mets kind of carved our lefties up. But I was lucky enough in game 3, it was Rick Ankiel's game. He was going through a tough time at this point because he had the yips, and he started the game. And I mean, I think he threw 5 pitches to the backstop. One of them like almost out of the stadium, literally. Like, and they call down to the bullpen in the first inning and get me warm. And I come into the game and end up going like 4 2/3 or 5 innings and giving up 1 run. And it was a solo home run to Mike Piazza in that game. That was pretty cool. We did. I don't know if we. I don't think we won that game, but it was a really close game. We ended up losing the series, and that was the year that the Mets played the Yankees in the Subway Series. That's super memorable time there. And then I can remember after that game, I always did a workout and condition, and my workout that day was to get to the field early and run the stadium in the Met Stadium, run the stairs. And I'll never forget that there was one reporter there, and took a picture of me running the stadium, and it was in a little excerpt in the newspaper, and somebody sent me that, and I still have that to this day. But it was just that mindset of, start, continue to train, even though I knew it might not be another start, because we were in this last series. But those are some of the most memorable things. And then in the off season, this is crazy. That season ends right there. You're done after that NLCS. You go home and you start preparing, for the off season. And I had actually lived at home with my parents during the off season because we had a giant weight room there. My dad was he worked out, and I had everything that I needed there to work out and train, all the fields to use that I needed to use. I'd go to Clemson and work out with their program because Jodon was there. My little brother was at Clemson. So I got to train with all their football players and baseball players, and they were kind enough to welcome me there to work out with them all the time. But they did that with a lot of pro guys. A lot of, there'd be quite a few pro guys back in there training, like Chris Benson, Shane Monahan, myself, Jason Dawsey would show up at times. They had another lefty, Ken Vining. He would show up at times, all really good pro guys. And so we had a group, and we all hung out. Scott Winchester, Seth Bryzik. So it was a big group of guys that would work out together in the off season. But was working out in the off season. I got a phone call. This is crazy. It's a crazy story. I got a phone call sitting at home, and it was a reporter, or I thought it was a reporter. And he said, "Hey, this is so-and-so from KLS 140 in St. Louis. How does it feel to be traded?" And I'm like, "What? Is this a joke? Like, is somebody playing a prank on me?" And I was like, "Traded? I didn't know I was traded." And I hear laughing in the background, and it's Mark McGuire on the phone saying, "Hey, Tony La Russa had him call me to tell me I got traded to the Expos." So that was the start of the Expo journey in Montreal.
Wow. So, so just that fast, you're changing uniforms and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
trying to understand the business side of it. It doesn't cease. I guess it ceases to be a game at some point. You start to realize the business end of things. If you could tell us a little bit about, you go from there, you pitched in Pittsburgh, you pitched in Oakland as well.
Yeah.
Take us through, basically from that point on, and just kind of give some highlights of your career then. And then as it starts to get towards the end of your big league career, professional career, started to realize that this was closing in on the end, and kind of how that came about for you.
Yeah. I spent 3 years in Montreal. Great cultural experience, baseball experience. It was kind of a catch-22 in that, I came out of spring training my first year there as the number 2 starter in the rotation in Montreal, and pitched okay, didn't pitch great that first full year. They had sent me down one time. I think I had options, so they had a lot of control over me. Went down to Trey, kind of was pissed off. I had Tommy John as my pitching coach. He kind of got my mental frame back right because he knew I was frustrated, and pitched really good. They called me right back up. Put me in a lot of different roles, made me a long man, made me a 7th inning guy, made me an 8th inning guy, made me a closer. So they never really gave me one role. They just kind of, fiddled around with my role. And I was like, I'll do whatever it takes to stay, and that was kind of the mentality right then, is because I knew it was going to be hard to stay because Montreal was in turmoil right in that era. When I was there, we were living in Puerto Rico the next year because Montreal was getting disbanded. We were losing losing the team. Pitched a little bit, didn't stay up a ton that year. I bounced back and forth that second full year in Montreal. So was kind of fighting to just stay in the big leagues. Then the third year, I pitched really good in Montreal as a reliever. And they call me in at the end of the year and they say, hey, we're going to non-tender you, which means they're not going to re-sign me. But they're going to have an option to sign me. But they said we want to re-sign you, meaning they're going to take me off the 40-man or the 25-man roster. So I say, okay, well, I'm leaving. I'm going to go check my other options out. I've had enough time here in Montreal. So I signed with Oakland in the offseason, spent 2 years in Oakland pitching with Hudson, Mulder, and Zito in that rotation. That was an awesome experience. Bounced back and forth there, didn't really gain traction there. That was the time during Billy Bean ball where it was Moneyball. So I got to go through that whole thing. I was part of the Moneyball process. I was one of those guys who was a Moneyball guy, low pay, high return. I didn't really give him a high return. I was kind of winding it down. In the meantime, I'd played, 3 years of winter ball in the Dominican during that whole stretch of Montreal and Oakland. And then after my time with Oakland, I knew I was kind of on the verge of finishing. I signed a 1-year deal with Pittsburgh and just tried to get as much big league time as I could there, and didn't get that much big league time. I think I had one appearance with St. Louis or two, or with Pittsburgh. Went home in the off season, thought about where I was, and then how old I was, and said, "Hey, I'm hanging them up. I'm gonna retire." And then start another journey. I knew I wanted to get in college coaching, so started that journey. Coached 3 years at Furman University, which was awesome with Ron Smith. Was very blessed and grateful he gave me an opportunity to start, and then had a chance to go back to my alma mater, the Citadel, and spent 6 years there with the Citadel, and was seeing my kids grow up. I had 2 boys, and I was kind of evaluating like if I wanted to stay in college coaching or not, and I really did want to. But I made a decision to get out of college coaching for my boys, because I was never home and I was missing all their stuff. Got out of college coaching, went into a different avenue of business, and that's where I'm at today. And then had a chance to go coach at Oceanside, and thought it was a great chance to get back on the field. I loved coaching and give my boys a good opportunity to be in a good program, and I get to coach them and see them play through their high school career.
Well, obviously, you've enjoyed quite a career as a baseball player, and of course, in the afterlife. Starting at 32 years old, you got to figure out what you're going to do, and obviously, you poured yourself back into the game you love and you were good at. But as a coach, if you could tell us a little bit about what are some of the things you realized. I guess you got into it because you wanted to be around the game, but once you got into it and you piled up the years in the professional, as a college baseball coach, and then also at the high school level. If you could kind of talk a little bit about how that has been for you and different things you realized about yourself, same game, but a different aspect of it.
Yeah. It's you go into everything with an open mindset, with trying to learn as much as you can from a lot of people who have great insight, great knowledge about all parts of the game. And I think I learned a ton in pro ball about a swing, about hitters, about how to pitch. So I had good knowledge of that. I also had good knowledge of background of how to catch. I was always intrigued as a catcher, because I grew up as a catcher and would always listen to my catchers and learn as much as I could from them, because, those guys, those catchers, there's great catchers that have been managers in the big leagues, and are some of the best managers who were catchers in the big leagues. And it's easy because those guys they see it all. They have to teach it all. They have to talk to the pitchers. They have to go over scouting reports. They have to understand all that. So the knowledge that I learned in pro ball, I wanted it to carry over to college, but obviously college is a different breed, a little different. You don't have those. You don't have great players in 25 great players. You have 4 or 5 great players. So you have to be careful in college, or I did. This is what I learned early: is to not just focus on those 5 players, but focus on all 40 guys that you have, or all. If I was a pitching coach or the catching coach, focus on your group, not just those 5 guys who were you thought had a chance to go to the next level, or 4 guys, because there's not that many on each college team. Now in programs like the SEC or ACC, you're gonna have more of those guys. But that was one of the things that I learned early, is to address all of them in equal fashion, as opposed to just, putting a lot of investment and time into your dudes. Which those guys are going to win for you, though. Those guys are going to help you win, your dudes. I learned a lot in college, the recruiting side of things, how nasty it could get. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed being on the road. I enjoyed talking to families. I enjoyed learning about the kid. Now it's changed so much. I mean, it's hard, a lot harder for a high school kid to go to college these days because of the dynamic of college baseball. And you learn that as a high school coach, just as time evolves. So that's a whole nother segment we could do together, just how things have evolved. As a coach, for me, I think the biggest thing is that I try to spend as much time on making these guys become men and understanding their mentality, like the mental side of it, and learning the game. Like, so many kids now, like, that I see and that I hear from college coaches, they don't know the game. They've played the game, but they don't know it. Like, things don't register for them quickly on the field. Whereas that's what I'm trying to do as a high school coach, is get them to be, 2 or 3 plays ahead, so that things register for them quickly which speeds up for high school kids as they go from JV to high school, from high school to college. And, as a high school player, your ultimate goal is you want to go play college baseball. And I want all my guys to want to go play college baseball. But not everyone's going to go play, but you try to help all of them equally.
Well, obviously, you're talking about having to coach your whole roster, not just the guys that maybe people see on the field, but
Yeah.
every kid that
Yes.
shows up to practice. You got to work with all those guys,
All
and
of
you've been very fortunate to have a pretty good roster at Oceanside. You guys have won a state championship while you've been there. You played for another one, and you're about to start your third season.
them. Yep.
What would you say is the most enjoyable or most satisfying thing about working with teenagers, who still aspire to play either at the college level or pro level? Tell me some of your impressions and some of the things you enjoy most about working with those guys.
Yeah, I enjoy the process, like going through the 4-year process, which I hadn't got to have a group for 4 years yet in college, in high school. So this is my third year. So those freshmen that are coming in will be my 4-year guys. But just the whole process, the work that you see gets put in, and the development and the physical maturity that happens, the leadership that happens through, within your program, the guys that become leaders, those are all things that are super rewarding to me as a coach, because I am the ultimate, like, leader of the program. And when I can have 3 leaders on the field or 4 leaders on the field that can coach the game, that can teach the game, that can communicate the game, and that you don't have to police them, that they're policing themselves, that's ultimately, like, one of the biggest things, that rewards that I have as a coach, to see those guys, develop as men and develop as baseball players, not just on the field, but off the field too. We do a lot of things off the field as well. So it's a well-rounded program where the kids are involved in the community and they take baseball serious, and that's what I enjoy. I love baseball, so it gives me the time to get back on the field. I love going to practice. I like watching a game. I like being involved in a game, managing a game.
Well, I know you love baseball, and you stay in touch with probably a lot of guys you played with. When you turn on the TV now, think about now. Put on the cap of a fan, but also a former baseball player. When you watch a big league game now, and we're just talking about the professional part, big league baseball, but then rewind it back to 20, 25 years ago when you were playing at that level against those household names. When you turn on TV, how is the game different than it was? And it wasn't that long ago when you played, but how is the game that you see on TV now, at the professional level, the major league level, different than when you played?
I think overall, in general, the first thing that jumps out to me is the pitching. Guys throw harder. I mean, that's just the way it is. You got 5 guys throwing 95, 99 and above on one team. That's crazy. We had like one that threw 95 or 96 back when I was coming up. So every team has that. I think the hitting has evolved. I think hitters, I don't necessarily think they're better. I think that overall there's more hitters that are better than when I was there. But the evolvement of the electronics, it's crazy how now you see the game professionally, like scouts being nerds. that are number guys. You don't see the scout who is learning the person or, knows how much heart you have. It's all about the numbers, the spin rate, the exit velo, the vertical and horizontal difference in pitches. So I feel like that's changed.
It definitely has. It's a very analytical game now,
Analytical.
but
Yeah.
it's still a game that, yeah, I mean, it's still a game that you love, and I love it too, and that's why we're both still in it and talking about it today. Before we land this plane, just you've been able to mention a lot of people throughout your life and your career that have been instrumental as a part of your life, or maybe helped boost your career to what it became. I'm just going to finish up. Any shout outs, anybody, and I know your list would be very long, but
Yeah.
if there's anybody else that you want to throw a bone to here, and then maybe finish up with some good advice either for a young Britt Reames or maybe a young player who's listening to this, or maybe the parent of a young player who's listening to this, as a dad who has a son who plays
Yeah.
and boys who play, and maybe just kind of land the plane that way for us. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Like first and foremost, my family, God, my brothers, my dad, my mom, like they're still all around. That they were vital, instrumental to the person, the player that I became. All the coaches that I had, I had some great coaches. All the college coaches that gave me a chance to come in and coach in college. Super thankful for them. My friends that have been long lifetime friends. Super thankful for them. As you get older, there's it's family, odd family, friends, baseball. That's the way it's always been for me. And the advice, that I would give a younger Brit or a younger kid coming up now is, just become as athletic as you can. I don't think that in this time frame and era that you have to play all the sports. I like for my guys to play multiple sports, but the specialization has started at an earlier age these days. And I don't think that's bad, because you have to be able to be specialized and better than the next guy. And sometimes you got to start earlier with giving up something that you really like. But to become athletic doesn't mean, the other sports help you athletically in all ranges and phases early in your career, but do athletic things. Be able to do, like, I remember, being good at trying to be good at everything, whether it was wakeboarding, water skiing, hydrosliding, jumping off a bridge, just trying to be good at and athletic at everything you do. And whether that means playing another sport or working with someone who can help you become more athletic, I think that would be one of the things that I give advice to those guys, that are younger than me, is just become athletic, be outside early, don't stay inside, do things outside. Yeah. And that's it, man. I'm thankful to be where I am today, and enjoy talking. I know I can talk. You said you're going to be quiet. Let me talk. I can talk. So, yeah.
Well, we're glad you talked. We're glad you talked with us today. Really covered a gamut of stuff from childhood all the way through, certainly the big leagues, and then what you're doing now to still be able to pour back into the game and the young people who play it and want to be the next Britt Reames. Britt Reames want to, and hope to be and aspire to do what you did. And so we appreciate your time. You mentioned you're 52. I'm not far behind you, but I was a little bit behind you. So, but I had a really good view of your career. And so it's really cool to be able to see what you accomplished and what you were able to do. A lot of people will never be able to taste, and you were able to and experience it. But I love the fact you can spit it right back out and tell us, the ins and outs of all of that and the really good times, but also the tough times that you had to endure. You're a wonderful example of perseverance. And of course, our boys have played together and gotten a chance to know each other in the coaching realm and just in baseball circles. We have a lot of mutual friends, and I just appreciate the friendship we've been able to have over these years, and just be able to sit and talk baseball, enjoy baseball, and even compete at stuff from time to time too. So
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
but I appreciate you a ton, Britt, and appreciate your time as well. And so we'll go ahead and wrap here. And once again, thank you. And for those of you folks that are listening, hopefully you enjoyed lots of the parts that Britt was able to talk about in today's podcast. So appreciate you joining the Bullpen Show. Just a reminder to folks, the Palmetto Games is right around the corner. It's going to be August 9 and 10 at Riley Park in Sumter. If you are invited to that, make sure I want to underscore that. If you're invited to that, all that information is on our website. The application's on there. the registration deadline is looming. So we need to get, if you haven't got that in, most guys have signed up, but if you haven't, make sure you get that in. High school coaches, make sure your guys know they're invited. And if they plan to attend, let us know that. So that's coming August 9 and 10. We look forward to that. That is our marquee event. Best will be on the field. As you know, Britt, a lot of college coaches, pro scouts will be showing up, and look forward to seeing those guys on display here coming up in just a few weeks. So once again, Austin Alexander with Britt Reames today. Thank you for joining us on the Bullpen Show, and hopefully we'll see you at the ballpark very soon.